Hello and welcome, friends, in the brand new episode of Crit Talks with Dr. Anand Kulkarni. I, Pranav, and of course with me, Ghanasham, both welcome you on this occasion. We have been discussing different facets of literary criticism and theory. In the last episode, we tried to understand modernism, and in today's episode, we are going to go a step ahead and try to measure a movement called as new criticism. I specifically mentioned the word movement because during the first half of 20th century, especially during the World War First, there were movements throughout the world where some deliberate efforts were made to change the face of criticism. To mention few, there was Russian formalism, where people like Shklovsky and Jakobson, who belonged to Prague linguistic circle. Then there were movements of formalism, especially in Europe. And when we come to US, that is America, we have a movement called as new criticism. So I think on this background, sir, I would like to ask you. First question is that why these people, a group of critics, used this particular term "new," and what exactly this news, in a way, stands for in the entire thinking of these people. So, what exactly new they brought to criticism? Let us begin from that point.
Yeah. Good morning to both of you, Dr. Pranav Ratnaparkhi and Professor Sham Orate, and good morning to all viewers as well. Today, we shall discuss new criticism, the proper movement in modernism. You correctly pointed out the background that helped formulate the modern criticism, and also the question, what is new in new criticism? To be very specific, there is nothing new in new criticism if you go by the routine understanding of criticism, because criticism is always a kind of self-discovery. It is a discovery of its own. But it was new in the sense that it was against the old. A very simple way of looking at is this, that new criticism was new because it was not old, or it was against the old. So we have to understand this term new in contradistinction way, that is against the old conventional, traditional practices of criticism. Well, that is one explanation that we can have. The other is, so what was new in new criticism then? The first thing was this, that the conventional criticism or the traditional criticism, which had been by that time an institutionalized practice in Europe and in America, the conventional criticism was more focused on humanism, morality, history, culture, and politics. So it was moralistic, social, and historical, to be precise. The traditional criticism, or what you call the Victorian criticism, was moralistic, it was historical, and it was social. So this new criticism was a revolution in the limited sense of the term against the conventional or the traditional set of values and approaches towards criticism, towards literature. That is one thing. The second thing was that new critics wanted to make criticism a self-sustained, self-reliant, self-dependent practice, exercise. They did not want to make it something which was context-based. New criticism as a system began in the 1940s in America. But before that, there were movements in Europe, especially in England, which went towards the formulation of certain formalist principles of literature. You pointed out the formalist movements in Europe, more specifically in England and in Russia. It was Russia first, then it was in England, and the pioneering figures who tried to take literary criticism and literature both away from the conventional assumptions towards the modernist assumptions were Eliot, Richards, Empson, and Lewis. The earlier three were instrumental: Eliot, Richards, and Empson, because Empson introduced the linguistic approach, which was more or less absent in the conventional literary criticism. The second, Eliot, was also very phenomenal in introducing the idea of text, the idea of art, the idea of poetry, which was decidedly and very intentionally very modernist in the sense. We will not discuss Eliot right now because that is not our focus. But this is only a passing reference, and also the background issues and figures who contributed in some way or the other towards the emergence of new criticism. And Richards was also very much instrumental. For example, you all know he wrote a book by the title Practical Criticism, which provided the necessary backdrop or the necessary roadmap towards the interpretation, towards the emergence of the rise of new criticism. So these were the background issues, the background notions which helped in some way to the new critics to lead towards a new movement. So the first thing that we can learn about new criticism is that it was an attempt to professionalize criticism. The first thing that we can understand is this, that it was an attempt to make criticism self-dependent, self-reliant, and professional. The second thing that the new critics did was, they wanted to oppose the traditional moralistic and historical criticism because they found it to be beside the point as far as the literary studies was concerned, in the sense that they did not want to come with value judgments about literature or literary works. By that time, text was not a very popular term. So literary works, they wanted to evaluate literary works not from the point of view of a person or a group or a community or certain moral standards. They wanted to come out with some objective principles, objective norms or values, which could in some way help to understand literature.
Okay.
So the third thing that they wanted to do was, they wanted to terminate the element of subjectivity, which was very strong in the conventional criticism. They wanted to make criticism objective. In the sense, because that is why new critics are called new Aristotelians. The reason is this, that they believed, and very heavily believed, in the principle of objectivity.
Correct.
And by objectivity, they suggested that critics should not fall in love with their personal likings and dislikings. Secondly, they should not bother about the extra textual elements, extra textual issues. And also at the same time, they should not be bothered by the conventional standards of morality and society, because that would take the readers and the critics away from the actual literary experience. The next feature, you can call it, which characterized new criticism, was that they were interpretative. They were less analytical and they were more interpretative. Of course, they opposed judgment. If judgment is one of the activities grouped under criticism, they opposed judgment. They opposed in some way evaluation also. And they, though evaluation was there in what they did, for example, if you read a book by any text written by any new critic, for example, Cleant Brooks, Understanding Poetry, for example, a book that he wrote, or any book by any new critic, you will understand this. There are so many of them. It starts with John
Crow Ransom.
And then you move on towards other critics as well. For example, you have Ivor Winter, who is less relatively referred to. And then you have Alan Tate as well. R.P. Blackmer is there. Many of them are there, and those intentional fallacy people were also there. New critics who introduced intentional fallacy and all those things. These critics were interested in seeing criticism as a professional, academic, intellectual exercise. They were not bothered about the the subjectivity, the personality. Uh, they were against criticism as a cult. They wanted to draw criticism out of this cult service,
Correct.
and they wanted to make it more or less scientific.
Yeah.
Another important influence on new critics was, of course, the discoveries that were taking place in science, and they, in some way, wanted to rationalize literary criticism in some way or the other, though they were not directly related to. And John Crowley Ransom differentiated between poetry and criticism, because he was the founder of New Criticism as a movement in America, and he wrote an essay by the same title, New Criticism Inclusive. And he also gave the name that we have today to this movement called New Criticism.
Right.
These were some of the aspects, elements involved in New Criticism, and also the background that was responsible for the rise of New Criticism.
Right, sir. So can we say that it was predominantly textual? So what kind of methodologies these people adopted for doing these things?
True, it is. That is, if you ask me what is New Criticism, it is nothing else if it is not textual. It is exclusively textual. And I'm using the word exclusive because it excluded all other aspects of literature. For example, what were the formative influences on the writer when he wrote it, the biography of the writer, the history of a particular society or the history of a particular period, which were the influences on the writing. So they avoided all kinds of contexts, and they focused on text. The reason was, as I earlier said, they wanted to be objective. And the credit goes to Eliot for the first time trailblazing or pigeonholing, in a way, if you allow me to use this word, for the study of literature. Because Eliot wanted, we all know that Eliot proposed the theory of impersonality.
Yeah.
And it is there that you will find the roots of the exclusive focus on text by the new critics.
Right.
Another reason why they focused on text was they believed that art is self-sufficient. Art is autonomous. And also, by extension, poetry.
Correct.
The other thing they were bothered about, that they were more interested in formal study of poetry, in particular, formal study of literature in particular. They believed that if you study structure, by structure, I mean everything that comes under structure, the formal features and all that. You can very correctly and properly understand literary work. So for considering text to be the pivotal point or the focal point of their study, these were some of the reasons why they did so. Eliot's influence was there. They believed that poetry is self-sufficient. They believed that contexts in some way unnecessarily mediated with the proper study of literary works. And more importantly, they believed that formal features were more important. And formal features were understood as organic with the content. So form and content were not separate for them. This was a movement away from the earlier movement, because earlier movement in criticism or earlier approach in criticism believed that content is important, and they did not bother much about form. New criticism took the focus away from content and rested the entire focus on form. So if you ask me what in what way they looked upon form, content, there was an integrity of form and content, and they did not separate form and content from each other.
Right.
in other words, we can say that they were the exact opposite of the Marxist approach to literature. Marxist critics were more bothered about contexts. New critics were more bothered about text.
Yeah. So, sir, who are the major contributors? Suppose the beginners want to know that from which point of time actually, or at what time they should start studying new criticism. What those points could be, those indicators could be.
Any student of criticism, or even for that matter, any teacher of criticism, should start with John Ransom Croway's book, or essay. That is a proper beginning, because if you have a correct understanding of the beginning of a particular movement, then it helps you in understanding the later developments of the movement.
Right.
Other very famous new critics were, of course, Cleant Brooks. The next should be Cleant Brooks, because Brooks was both. He was in a way very aggressive and very, very vocal also. I will not say he was vociferous, but he was very aggressive and he was very vocal. And aggressive, I mean to say, because he wanted it to be an academic practice. Brooks made literary criticism an academic practice. The reason why the professors of literature and professors of languages later on became the critics predominantly, the credit goes to Mr. Brooks because even John Croway Ransom also emphasized that there should be a formal training to critics for the study of literature. So John Ransom Croway could be a proper beginning, followed by Cleant Brooks. Later on, you have two other critics. One is Alan Tate, and you all might be knowing that Tate came out with the idea of tension, as much as Brooks came out with the idea of paradox. And Blackmer came out with the idea of heresy of paraphrase. The next one is R.P. Blackmer that you should study if you are interested in knowing what new criticism is. And John Ransom Croway came out with the idea of texture. So you shall see that they believed the study of literature as an organic form. They came out with certain single ideas which they believed that if you study a particular literary text with a particular idea that they had in their mind, like Tate's tension. Tate looked upon poetry as tension, nothing else but the expression of tension. Same is the case with Brooks. He looked upon poetry as the language of paradox. Same with John Ransom Croway, that he looked upon poetry as texture. So they picked out certain concepts, certain ideas, and they made that idea or notion to be both the tool, the methodology with which literature could be understood, and at the same time, that could work as the focal point for the study of literature. So that is how I think it should be done.
Correct.
One more thing which I should add over here, and then we should move on to the next question. I think Ghanesham has a question.
Yeah.
One more thing that I would like to add is that it is pedagogical. It is pedagogical. New criticism is pedagogical. That is why new criticism helps you to teach literature in the classes, in UG and PG classes of English departments, across the world. Because new criticism was not something like a theory. They did not propose any independent theory. They did not come out with a whole set of ideas which Marxism did, or psychoanalytic criticism did, or any other approach for that matter in modern period did. New criticism didn't do that. That is why it is pedagogical. And another thing, you can call this to be a limitation also of new criticism. It is this, that it exclusively focused on poetry. That is expressiveness of literature. They did not bother about the narrativity of literature or the dialogic form of literature. That is, you cannot study a novel with the help of new criticism. You cannot study a play with the help of new criticism. You can study poetry with the help of new criticism.
Right.
That is its limitation also, but that is its strength also, because
Strength
it narrowed itself down onto the study of poetry.
Right.
So pedagogy, it came as a pedagogy, and it was narrowed to the study of poetry. Are the two things that a beginner should keep in mind
Right.
before he studies, because then there are issues with which we are concerned, why they are just bothered about poetry and not other forms of literature. Could create confusion in the minds of the beginners.
Right.
That is the caution, I think, that we should take.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then new criticism opposes the traditional moralistic historical approach towards the work of art or text. Now that history is being written and rewritten by so many of us, there are historians everywhere now. Now, with these people in mind, is new criticism still relevant today? And if it is, how it is relevant today? I mean, to understand a work of art, a piece of literature, can we really apply new criticism in these times?
Okay, that is again a relative question, though important. It's a relative question. We shall separate this question into two parts. One is how far new critics opposed history and writing of history of literature. That was the part of their polemical strategy. They wanted to oppose history because they believed that because of the study of history and because of the study of morality, the proper literary study was hampered. It was affected and adversely affected. That is why they opposed it. That is one part of that. Of course, it doesn't mean that they could have approved the historical contexts. They did not, and they would never have, because they wanted to propose or put forth literature and literary criticism as self-sufficient and autonomous. So naturally, all contexts that could affect the study of literature were not likely to be approved by new critics. That is one part of our discussion, the question that you have asked. The second part is how far it is relevant today. It is more than relevant, because any study of literature is basically a textual study. So the focus on text is always there. Even those who opposed new criticism and opposed so strongly, especially the post-structuralist and post-modern critics and thinkers, were decidedly and intentionally new critical, because they were textual. You take the example of Foucault and Derrida, and more specifically Derrida, and you will understand that Derrida was so attentive towards the study of texts, that you would hardly find a practitioner of new criticism from the textual point of view as great as Derrida was.
His method was explication, I think.
Yeah, even today, very true. It was explication. In French criticism, it was explication. Though the idea was same, in the sense that the focus was on text. So what you and I do, what teachers and students across the world today do, is doing the same thing, studying texts. So study of text is always there. As long as we study text, new criticism will be there. Though in a very limited sense. We are not practicing new criticism in the sense that we do not consider text, in these days we do not consider text as autonomous and self-sufficient. We go for other contexts which help us in understanding literature, and we should do that. I'm on the side of that, even though this is a very personal note, that we should come out of the text and should try to bring the context into the study of literature. But as long as we study text, I think we are practicing the new critical idea of text in a very narrow sense. So it is relevant. If you ask me how far new criticism is relevant, it is relevant. We study text. Even today, we consider text to be the primary source, to be the source on which we either teach, argue, interpret, analyze, judge, evaluate, whatever activity we do. We write or speak on any work of art basically as a text. You and I teach in the class, teachers teach in the class, and students learn in the classes and appear for their examinations. And questions are also framed on texts.
Okay.
So text works as a pivotal,
Yes.
basic point for all of us. So in that sense, new criticism is there. And we
Right.
have to make a micro study of literary text for that matter.
Okay. I think, friends, Sir has probably taken us from a point where Eliot said in his tradition and individual talent that honest criticism should be directed towards not the poet but towards the poem. So from that point of time, I think till the point where an established kind of idea of textual study, a study which is objective and more concerned about the writing rather than the writer, Sir has taken us through this entire journey. And probably this is a focus, the change in the focus. So entire traditional criticism is, whether it's a classicism, neoclassicism or romanticism, it is all author-centric or in a way subjective. But this is probably the time when things started changing. So we are moving from author now towards the text. Later on, we move towards structure and then to context and then to reader. And of course, with deconstruction and other things, the things become extremely complex. But probably this is a shift or a kind of period of transition where the focus of criticism started changing away from author. So I think Sir has taken us through that entire journey. So thank you so much for your guidance. Probably the readers, the researchers and the teachers would definitely understand this part where we are moving from a traditional criticism towards a new criticism. So thank you so much for your guidance. I thank you for your very lucid explanation about these complex terms, because people keep reading about this, students keep reading about this, but they don't understand what exactly is the meaning of the word new. So after reading so much, the confusion is, instead of being less, becomes more. At what exactly is new in this, all this. But with, I think, your explanation, things are now getting into some kind of streamline, and we will continue to do so. So I conclude this episode by urging the readers to keep on watching these episodes of Crit Talks with Dr. Anand Kulkarni, and of course endorsing us by subscribing the channel. Thank you so much for your patient listening.